Hello, and welcome to the Imposter Syndrome Network podcast, where everyone belongs, especially if you think you don't. My name is Chris Grundeman, and I'm here with the pioneer of MumSec, our co-host, Zoe Rose.
Hey.
Hey, this is the Andy Taylor episode, and I think you're going to love it. In the words of a former coworker, who now happens to be a CTO in their own right, Andy is technically superb, his range of knowledge second to none, and he has an incredible ability to take on new technologies and concepts with apparent ease. And another former colleague said that Andy is a strong leader who's not afraid to pursue issues and drive them forward. This, combined with his broad range of technical skills and focus on automation, would make him a key member of any project team, as well as an excellent candidate for any technical leadership role. Hey, Andy, would you like to introduce yourself a bit for the Imposter Syndrome Network?
Yeah, I'm really honored to be here. Thank you so much. And luckily it's a podcast. You can't see that I'm really blushing after that. And it's almost ironic that I'm talking about imposter syndrome and coming onto a broad audience. But no, I'm really grateful. I've been in the network industry for, I don't know now, probably quite too long, 25, maybe 30 years. And about 15 years ago, got obsessed with network automation, normally been in large enterprise, and ultimately 2 years ago, migrated over to AWS, where I'm a network specialist there. And again, pushing network as code for cloud. So yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I'm hugely honored given the other guests you've had on before.
Yeah, thank you. You definitely fit right up there in the pantheon here, and appreciate you coming on. One of the ways that we know each other is through your Slack group, Cloud Networking as Code, which has, I think, almost 1,000 members now. So first of all, kudos to bringing together such a great group of engineers. And I can say, being a long time and frequent community organizer myself, I understand the work that's involved in that. And because of that, I'd love to understand your motivation a bit more. What is it that sparked the idea and drives your efforts to building and managing this group?
So I think community. If you build a strong, vibrant community where people are free to talk and, collaborate and share ideas, good things will always come from that. If you build something great, but no community underneath it, I think ultimately it tends to die out. And look, we all need a bit of help every now and again. Some, me more than most, a lot of the time. But, if you've got people that are like-minded, we've got a vested interest in something, in this case, network automation, then you've got great people to talk to. I've met some amazing people through that. And, hopefully other people have too. And that's all it is. It's just getting a community where, people have got other people to talk to. I think the biggest driver is, I got into IT by accident almost. And I was very, very lucky to have 2 mentors. One of them now works for AWS, and without them, well, I don't know what I'd be doing now. I certainly wouldn't be where I am today. And I think there's always a case of pay it forward.
One thing I thought was interesting is we get the comments about community and how vital it is over and over again. And I mean, I also agree. Community is 100% important. But I'm curious on, because you have mentioned a bit about imposter syndrome already. Pre-recording this, we were chatting a bit about that. And I saw your quite blushing cheeks when Chris gave your intro. So I'm curious on how the community and mentoring has enhanced your career and enhanced your journey through quite a vast amount of roles and quite a bit of experience.
So I think you get such a diverse view from people. If you're helping someone else or mentoring, it often makes you think about things in a different perspective. When I was quite a bit younger, I was never really kind of hugely sporty, but then like many, I saw Bruce Lee doing a Long Street episode, funny enough, and then I became, again, marginally obsessed with martial arts, and I've done it for sort of 30 years, and eventually was asked to teach, and I think that was like the moment my stomach dropped, and I was like, what? And I think, my instructor at the time, which I will always have on a pedestal, said, just do it and be like a swan. So look confident on the outside. And even if under the water, your legs are flapping around and you're really having a bad time. And it really helped, fake it till you make it almost. But I think I've tried to carry that on when I've working with people, even if I'm really nervous about doing something, because, as soon as you start talking to someone and you've got this thing in common, you tend to find that a lot of those nerves and, preconceptions and everything else dissipate. And suddenly you've got this passionate conversation about something. And I think there's nothing more rewarding than if you can help someone in their journey, especially as, some people that I'll always be grateful to, they help me on mine. So, I just think it's a lovely thing to be able to do when you can.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you mentioned the swan. That's something I keep. I have a little sheet of kind of my top goals and like words I want to focus on, and just a little thing I look at least once a week and try and look at. And one of the things is, it's actually a sentence I wrote like in a performance review some years ago, and my boss at the time pulled it out and like really kind of put it back at me, and so I've kept it since then. What I wrote was, exceeding challenging goals by a measure large enough and in ways important enough to make people take notice, but having it look and feel effortless. But the thing is, right after that, in parentheses, I have it written the swan, because that's exactly what it is, right? It's the frantic kicking underwater that looks completely ridiculous, but above ground, very elegant and just kind of cruising along. And I think that's the goal. Yeah.
Yeah, it really kind of resonated with me when I was younger, and I kind of went through that. And I think it's just one of those things that it's always stuck with me. So when you have a moment where you're nervous, but you've got to hold your composure, it always comes back to my mind. I think it's amazing advice, and it's worked well for me.
Yeah.
So if we look at your current role, the networking specialist solutions architect, I think I said that right?
You did.
I'm curious, how would you define what you actually do from a day-to-day? Like if we look at a typical day for you, what does that look like?
Oh, wow. Typical day. I'm not sure there is a typical day. So I think a couple of things really. So kind of the kind of official day jobs really, working with customers to define architecture that is suitable for their requirements, taking into consideration growth, things coming down the pipeline, and the unknown unknowns, which is brilliant because you get a lot of customer interaction and get to see how people are doing things in very different ways. I also, the small team that we are, also get to work very closely with product management in the networking space to help define some strategy and what customers really need. So that's brilliant. And then the other side of it is trying to innovate. So I'm very lucky that I'm working with a really small group of super passionate, friendly people, where we can come up with ideas around, where we think we can make a difference, where there's potentially demands or gaps in the market that need filling, and it's just technically enabling other people and just bouncing off each other. I feel super humbled. They're very, very bright folks, but a great team to work with. And I think with that, it kind of gets you out of bed in the morning thinking, we've got another challenge. This is really good. And when you have a bad day, you've still got those people to fall back on. And it makes the world of difference. So I guess a long answer to a short question was helping customers define strategic architecture. I've tried to look at this in like 3 pillars: architecture that meets business requirements, security, obviously, but then really importantly, the operational aspects, because I think when you've come from an operations up through, that proverbial ladder of operations, engineering, architecture, it's really important that, an architecture meets requirements, but is something that operations can use at the same time. And I think when you combine all of those 3, then you end up with something that's, it's really usable for the customer and hopefully flexible enough to adapt to as they bring more requirements on, or their business changes, that, you're not designed into a corner.
Well, one thing that stood out to me as you were saying is you kind of talk about, okay, well, I do these 3 things, but those are major things. I worked in consulting. Most of my career has been consulting. And that is the biggest challenge people have, is creating or designing a solution based on the actual requirements that's going to work, that's secure, and is future-proof. I'm curious about, based on your previous experience and where you are now, was there a defining role that really kind of set those foundations to be able to create you or put you in a position where you're comfortable doing quite a challenging task at the moment? Or was it a sort of a collaboration of different roles that kind of brought your journey to where it is now?
Wow, that's a great question. So I think it's a collaboration, really. I think I've been super lucky that pretty much all of the roles that I've had really great people around me that have been supportive, and that's really kind of laid that foundation. And again, trying to, if it's a public one or it's a community within the organization you work with, is to build that really open, honest environment where they feel free asking questions without ridicule. They can ask for help, but also, brainstorm and bring out these ideas. I think then you start getting these different perspectives on what people want, where they're stuck, and that helps you grow. So yeah, I think really it's been a case of being with people and those people giving you ideas, and you remember particular ideas. And I've always liked being outside my comfort zone, not too far out, but I like being out my comfort zone. Like I'd never take a role that I could do because I'm not going to grow from it. I've always been super technically curious. I remember we had quite a difficult upbringing, and we didn't have much. And my mum and dad saved up, and we got a bike. And I think before I rode it, I took it apart. And let's just say it didn't go down very well. But I love to see what was working, why it was working this way. And I think that really helps then when you've got like a big project and, you want to understand why, and you can help relay that to other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder, you mentioned, one of the moments in kind of, I guess, the more the martial arts kind of side of things where you got asked to be a teacher. And it seems like maybe that sense of teaching and kind of helping other people weaves through a lot of what you do.
I think it's, at the end of the day, we've got things, right? But they're transient. They come and go. People are what life's about. So, if you can help someone like I was helped, then, you've made a difference in someone's life. And, that's what life should be about. I think sometimes we lose some of the personal interaction with Slack or IM clients and texts. We don't often get to talk much, despite being, people don't see it because I've got this kind of bravado around being loud and in everyone, but actually I'm pretty shy, and, I've got this kind of, as I said, imposter syndrome, which is now getting better. But I do love talking to people, anybody, because no matter what conversation you have, you'll always come away. As long as you've got an open mind, you'll always come away learning something. And it makes you a better person for it.
I'm curious to what, I suppose, two sides. What was the best job you had and why? And then on the flip side, what was the worst job you had and why? And it could be, it wasn't a bad job, it just wasn't the right job for you, for example.
Best job's really hard because I think I've always tried to be outside my comfort zone. So I'm always learning something, but it would have to be my first job in IT. It must be, because I'd always worked I'd actually come into this company as a temp doing customer services, picking the phone up on a help desk. And, that's what I did. And then bizarrely, they said, well, we want you to stay on. The person that was there, we're letting them go, so we want you to stay on. And that was the scope of the role. It was to, pick the phone up and take some notes and pass it on to someone else. But it was a frontline support desk, and I really had no interest in IT, none. Working in, there were RPG programmers there was databases, and then there was networks. I remember this is networks way back in the day, where networks were still, not something that, is so accessible as they are today. And got talking to the guy that was doing the frontline support for networking, and we got on quite well. And I thought, this is really interesting. And then he said, I'm leaving. So really? So he went up and handed his notice in, and I waited a few minutes, and then I walked up and said, well, about this role, can I do it? And the manager said quite rightly, not a chance. You don't have any background in this. You've got no training. No. I said, look, I'm sure I can do this. Just give me an opportunity to try. And they said, no, that's not going to happen. The next day he said to me, look, if you want to do it, we'll give it a go. It's on you. And if you can't do it, then you don't have your old job back. That would have been gone. Fine with me. Let's try it. And, I had to teach myself. And, then I think that's where I met these individuals that changed my life, really. And I learn every day. And this is, I think, because it was a while ago, it was kind of old school. So if I went down and asked the same question twice, or I didn't do the due diligence beforehand, I would be told in no uncertain terms, go back up and do the work and then come back down and talk. And, it really taught me how to think about things and how to research things. And I think that, it was a life-changing experience. So that I really have to put that as best job. Worst job. I went in for an interview, for a company which shall remain nameless, and it's not on my CV, because I was there for that short amount of time, where they wanted everything basically, and it sounded like a great role. And then I kind of got the job, got in there, and they explained actually, this is the data center, and it was actually, probably the size of a small bathroom. No, I'm not exaggerating. And it's a big company. And then my role has turned out that I was essentially adding users to a firewall. That was it. So hang on. You really, really, really don't need me. So I wrote a document on why you don't, and actually how you could not even have this role, and left.
That's awesome.
It sounds like you left them in a better position, though.
Oh, absolutely. They didn't need someone to do it. And it was one of those roles that you just really could either automate or just be a little bit more sensible about how you do it. And they didn't need it. So, I didn't want to, I'm not really good if I'm doing something that there's no mental stimulation, if I'm not trying to learn something new. And it just wasn't the right thing for me. And I don't think in fairness, it was probably the right thing for them to even have. So I think it was, it was a mutual, this isn't going to work out. And, I moved on to something better.
Nice. That's awesome. So, I definitely, your story about how you started, right? That first job that's also your favorite job, where you kind of, asked to be thrown into the fire and then had to figure it out on the fly. I definitely, see a little bit of my career and my beginnings in that as well. And I'm curious, for me, while it was an invigorating time and I loved it and really, really enjoyed kind of discovering networks and the internet and learning about it. But at the same time, I always felt a little bit behind. I'm a high school dropout. I didn't go to college.
Me too.
And so kind of fell into networking and found my place there. But always was, a little bit comparing myself maybe to friends who had stuck it out in high school and gone on to college and things like that. Or just even looking around me, I ended up at one point working at Cable Labs, which was like an R&D place where, people had multiple PhDs and there was I working alongside them and things. So I don't know if that's affected you as well and kind of getting started and having to figure it out on your own. And
hugely. I mean, where I am today, there's some incredibly bright people. Friends of mine are doing, as you say, PhDs or multiple PhDs, got an incredible track record, written books. And I wasn't academic at school. If I don't really enjoy something, I can't pay too much attention to it. And, not saying I was purposely going to raise on this call. And, but in the sense of being, of openness and transparency, after 30 odd years, turns out I've got undiagnosed ADHD, and that explains so much of my childhood, where I just couldn't sit down and study or focus, and I didn't do well at school. But if I did enjoy something, I have a passion for something, like I said, originally it was martial arts. I love it to this day still, that I would really hyper focus on it. I'd love it. And I think it was kind of my superpower and my kryptonite at the same time. And it's a very fine juggling act between the two. And it's only recently I found out about this, and that's really helped because, you understand why you do things in a particular way, and you can put strategies in place to make sure that you don't fall short, but you can use kind of the superpower part of it when you need to, and the kryptonite you can try and avoid. And again, even when I went through that, I was very lucky that the team I'm in currently are super supportive, and that made a world of difference. But again, that really goes back to this people relationship. So I completely understand where you're from, and I think that's a really major factor, because I always thought, well, I'm missing something. I'm not as good because I didn't have this training, I didn't have this background. What is it I don't know? I don't know this, and you kind of almost get to a point where you start doubting everything. And then when you are asked to do something, I was asked to do a couple of talks, and I'd often say, look, no, because who am I? Honestly, who am I to get up on the stage and say about, whatever it is that the subject's about? There's people out there that are far better than me. And it's only recently that when I got to a point, I think maybe age has helped a little bit, but you kind of get to a point where I just think, Brene Brown has got an amazing self-books and she's got something on Netflix. And I think some of the stuff that she's done around daring greatly, especially that she quotes the Teddy Roosevelt Man in the Arena speech. And it really, really, really resonated with me, both from an IT perspective. And obviously I used to compete a lot in martial arts, and both of those resonated with this speech. And I've watched it a few times now, and I listen to audiobooks quite a bit. And every time I listen to it, I don't know, it just really resonates. And I think that's really, really, really helped.
I would agree with the age thing a bit, because for me, as I've gotten older, it's helped me care less. I know that sounds bad, but
No,
I almost care less about people and their judgment because that has definitely held me back in a lot of places. I was absolutely terrified of making a mistake, absolutely terrified, which holds you back from succeeding, because you need to make mistakes. And I've made huge mistakes.
Well, you learn from your mistakes, right? If you don't make mistakes, you don't learn.
Yeah, exactly. They were hugely beneficial. I took stuff down and I learned very quickly how to pick it back up.
Oh, I've done that. And, I've had roles before where, I've gone in, I actually didn't know too much about a particular thing, and it ends up, building in a lab and understanding it, and then suddenly I feel better. But if you don't make those mistakes, like I love watching, like when people are doing things on YouTube, for argument's sake, and they're coding or they're building a lab. If someone goes in and builds this lab and it's flawless, you don't get that much from it. But if you go in and you see the mistakes and then the thinking and the process behind why did it go wrong, what can I do to fix it? And then going on to those next steps, that's when you learn the most. So, but funny enough, I'll say that to someone else. But in my head, if I were to make a mistake when I was doing something, I'd be mortified. It's like, oh no. And then it brings back all those feelings of actually, I shouldn't be doing this. I'm not good enough. But I think now that as a community, we're being far more open about these things. And all kudos to you for this amazing podcast and kind of getting this out there for people to listen to. Not me, but just generally the people that you do have on there is amazing, because, when people look up, like I have, to some of the guests that you've had and think, wow, I can't believe that, you've struggled with this too. And I think that really helps you understand, look, you've done really well, and I really respect you, and you've gone through this. So let's just kind of as a community move forward.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I was going to say is, you'd mentioned a bit ago about feeling, one, not being able to make mistakes because then your confidence is impacted, but then two, kind of learning how to learn. That was the one thing for me, that, because I did go to college. I was an IT manager, and then I went back to college to learn about IT. And that was actually the takeaway I had. It wasn't the content they were teaching. And I did learn some, of course. A lot of it I already had hands-on experience on. But it was the allowing myself to make mistakes, because it was in a lab. It was in a school lab. So I could completely destroy the lab and it would be fine. I wasn't taking down a production network. And also it was teaching me how to learn, which I think was the biggest takeaway.
I think we're not often, or certainly when I was at school, we weren't taught how to learn. And that's kind of problematic, right? I was able to coast to a point. And I think, and I didn't really study for the reasons we've discussed already. And then suddenly when it got difficult, I didn't really know how to study or learn and then quite a bit later, I attended an online course called Learning How to Learn by Barbara Oakley. And I must admit, it's a free course and I learned so much from it. I think it's one of the biggest mass online courses there is, but it's amazing. And it really gives you some tips and strategies. And it's something I've really struggled with. And only recently, I think, I admit, and this is not through being humble, but I admit, I might not be the brightest spark in the toolbox, but I'm super stubborn. So, if I want to kind of learn something, I'll put the effort in and just keep going until I get it. It sometimes backfires because sometimes I don't know, I didn't know when to ask for help. And I'm a lot better at that now, but learning how to learn and asking your peers and your colleagues about, look, I'm really stuck with this. Can you kind of help me? I've done all the due diligence. I've done all the study, but I still can't do this. I think people would be surprised how willing other people are to, especially if it's a subject they're interested in, how willing they are then to give you their time to explain things and help you along your way.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, right? To both those things, right? Learning how to learn, I think, is something that I personally think everyone should focus on a lot more than we do. I wish our schools did a better job of it. To your point, a lot of my schooling was just about memorization, which I hated, and so I was in a similar boat to you.
I was terrible at it.
Yeah, if I knew it, great, I'd do well, and if I didn't, I didn't put much effort in because memorizing the multiplication tables just didn't really appeal to me. Yeah, but critical thinking does.
We're not taught that, and that's the problem. At school, we're not taught, or I certainly wasn't. Things like critical thinking. How to study, different techniques for these sorts of things that will really help you in your career. You were taught to memorize, and that's it, parrot fashion. And the second the exam was done, gone. Or in my case, the second the exam started, gone. So, and I think that there's a lot of really good material out there. And sometimes it's just a case of either looking and getting recommendations, or if someone else is in the same boat as you and they're quite open about being in that situation, ask them. I mean, again, if people find things that have really helped them, I find most of the time they're really happy to kind of explain how it helped, and look, maybe it'll help you.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially, I think, on those kind of things, I've found that if your request for help comes with a compliment, right? Like, I see that you're so good at this. I see that you're doing really well with this. Can you show me how you do that? It tends to, even if they're busy and want to, tell you to F off, they usually don't if you come at it right, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think also, especially in this industry, if someone is passionate about what they do, I'd say 99% of the time, even if they're busy, they'll say, look, I'd love to help you. I'm just stuck with something now, but I'll get back to you, and they will, because we love what we do. And that passion then comes across when someone else is saying, I really want to be able to do that too. So it's very rare that someone says, no,
yeah,
too busy, or I'm not interested. I don't think I've ever had it happen.
That's a good deal. Yeah. Well, I think that asking for help is huge. One thing that no one can help us with is that we're out of time for today.
Oh, wow. That went so quickly.
Yes, real quick. It was a great conversation. Andy, do you have any projects or causes that we either did talk about or haven't talked about that you want to highlight for the Imposter Syndrome Network?
Only one. And I think people are probably sick to death of me banging on about this. But I think, certainly from a network, folks, that a lot of us have come from very traditional backgrounds where, we've had CLI on one side, or we've had actually Notepad on one side and maybe Secure CLT on the other. We've cut and pasted, and that's been great. But, as times move on, it's really about taking that risk, right? Learning how to do either coding or using a framework to start automating the boring tasks you don't want to do. No one wants to come in and do the same really error-prone and laborious stuff. So get involved in the community. You'll have loads of people who want to help you. And I think it's a really exciting, great place to be right now. And as a personal thing, look, you've kindly, as part of the bio, put the Slack group in that I'm part of. Reach out to me. I'm super happy to help anyone that would is interested and wants to get involved. So yeah, ping me anytime.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll have your Twitter and your LinkedIn, and then the link to sign up for the Slack group as well in the show notes. So definitely take a look at those. Andy, thank you so much for sharing your story with the Imposter Syndrome Network.
I am incredibly humbled to have been asked, and I'm very, very grateful. So thank you so much, and please keep doing what you're doing. This is amazing service for people.
Thanks. And thank you to all of our listeners for your time, your attention, and your support. If you found this episode insightful or interesting, please consider paying it forward by letting others know about this show and the great guests we have on. One more thing before we close out, Andy, I am curious. We talked a little bit about imposter syndrome and kind of where it came from and a little bit of how it's gotten, maybe easier to deal with throughout your life. But I wonder, what do you do these days when you feel that imposter syndrome kicking in, when you feel like you're out of place or not smart enough, not good enough? Is there anything you do to shake it off or move past it, or anything you'd share with us?
So I think there's a book with the title of Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And I think, as I said to you, like an instructor that I had a long, long time ago said about, if you're up there in front of the class and you're really panicking, then think about a swan, right? So the swan looks elegant, confident, beautiful. I'm not saying I look beautiful, but at least elegant and confident. But under the water, those legs are flying away furiously. And I think it's a great analogy that I've always taken forward. I'm really panicking. Drink something so your mouth doesn't go dry, because when that happens, it's all over for me. And then, fake it till you make it. The more success you have with that, then slowly but surely you get more confident. And I think that's something that's helped me, throughout my life.
I like it. The image of the swan will definitely be with me now in all those situations. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks again. And we'll be back next week.
Rubbish. What was my question? Sorry.
That's okay.
Starting over. One thing I think is interesting is we get that comment quite a bit about. We get that comment quite a. Sorry. We get that comment. Yes, that's Daddy thing.
Perfectly timed.
Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry to our sound guy. Start over again.